like to ask all four of you if there is one thing that is number one on your wish list for dealing with or combating or preventing domestic violence, what would that number one item be?
I could answer that easily.
Okay.
I think it would be to figure out a way to keep people from getting intoxicated. That is every domestic violence case that ends up in the court, at least that I can recall, has to do, as Sergeant Chesley said, with alcohol or drugs. Because people lose control of themselves, their inhibitions, and that's at least that. It's not a real practical thing, though, right? So I think you know, more, if there was one, that would be it. It would be counseling people on drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and that's what we try to do, I think. Judge would echo that. In sentencing, we try to make sure these people are getting sentences where they're not allowed to drink alcohol for 6 months. And, you know, they're not allowed to do drugs at all, but we put an order that says don't do drugs for 6 months, things like that, so that they can't do those things, and we drug test them to make sure. But I think realistically it would be, you know, working with Marcia, working with the community to get these people out of the domestic violence cycle so it doesn't happen again, and preventing that, because at least from my perspective, and that's the thing, I'm seeing it later on, but I think the big thing is the re-offenders and getting stuck in the cycle, and you know, the people get closer every time. It's just such a horrible thing.
Well, and you have to take into consideration why, and, you know, I hear people say all the time, why doesn't she just leave, or why doesn't he just leave? Well, there's so many reasons. There are just so many reasons, and they're just compelling reasons for the victim. You know, first of all, they fell in love with this person and got into the relationship. And it's very difficult. Think of yourself. How much, you know, a person will put up with when they fell in love with a person. Do they really want to stop that relationship? Well, most people don't. They want it to improve, and they want somebody to help them to make it better. And they want to think, oh, this is never going to happen again. And the abuser tells them, I'll never do this again. I'll never do this again. I promise. This is a one-time deal. And we call this the honeymoon phase after the abuse. And it'll go on, and everything will be fine for maybe months, and then that pressure starts building up, and all of a sudden it escalates to an explosive state, and here it happens again. And so there's so many times, you know, the victim thinks, oh, it's not going to happen. He was just drunk. He just came home high on drugs. I shouldn't have said what I did, and I won't say it again. And victims are very good on learning how to keep themselves safe, and the triggers that they need to avoid so this doesn't happen. But there's also other reasons, just because they may love him. There's children involved. They're afraid to lose custody of the children. Threatening on the pets. You'd be surprised how many abusers will threaten pets. And they're part of the family. So economic abuse, you know, he's the breadwinner. Where are they going to go? How are they going to take care of their children? How are they going to pay their rent? So all of these factors, and most victims will leave 7 times prior to leaving permanently.
So we didn't hear
7
mine or
times.
Saturday about their wish list.
You have a wish list?
I'll stand up. Real quick, mine would be, you got to think when we respond on these situations, big bad police, you know, speaking to a female and she's just been through an abusive situation, now police are talking to them. What I've seen work in other agencies is they're able to respond like a 24-hour service, a women's crisis center, or some type of victim advocacy group that will come out and they'll explain all this information instead of having a police officer explain it to them. They're able to explain it to them and really go into depth and start that support system. Now they have a friend that's there for them no matter what. And the time when we're able to reach those victims most is just right after they've been abused. Give it a week or two and they forget about it, but during the action or right during when it's fresh, if we can get someone to help them and say, this isn't going to happen, that they're not going to do this to you. If someone can respond that is more on their level instead of from a police level that can really explain and be their friends, that would be something we would love to see.
Well, I might mention that we have a 24-hour hotline where the victims can call in, so day or night, holidays, whatever. We always have an advocate available 24 hours to talk with the victim and let them know what the different options are and the different resources. And, you know, if they need what we call an emergency TPO and say that it's on a weekend, then our shelter is able to do that for the victims. So, you know, there are a lot of backups
It's
that
getting
the
them to
victim
call,
can
I
use.
think is what Chesley was talking about.
Yeah.
Getting them to call.
Your Honor,
Getting them to call, you can't force them.
That's right.
What are
Getting
your
them to
hours,
call.
Marcia?
I was just gonna explain it to her in just a second, but let's listen to see if the judge has a wish list.
I'll be brief. The thing that comes to mind for the court, you know, as we work our way through a case, it gets to the point where there may be a sentencing hearing. The court tries to stay aware of the different resources in the community, make use of those in considering a sentence. Sometimes we run into situations where a person could really use inpatient treatment, for example, or somebody's having a difficult time, you know, paying for counseling or something like that. It's difficult when you've got somebody that's willing to get the treatment, but we sometimes have challenges getting them actually into a program that will accept them. So to the extent, you know, additional connections could be made to try and help us tap into some of those resources in other communities, that would be helpful.
All right, one more question and then.
This isn't a question, but I wanted to bring it up. So, I pressed when we had the Attorney General here speaking on this topic. And she explained some programs they were doing and trying to build to try and help, starting grade school, middle school, to help people develop self-confidence and strength to not get in this situation in the first place. Programs in the Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, children and young adults identify what's not right and what they should steer away from. I think the big thing is we need to help prevent this from happening in the first place.
One thing I might mention in reference to that is that Safe Nest has an advocate who is dedicated just to going into the high schools, the middle schools, and the elementary schools and talking about domestic violence and anger issues and what, you know, if people are angry in your home, what are you doing, you know, identifying it. And she does come up here to Mesquite